Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaksson-Hurst.
Hi guys, welcome back to another show. This week we've got a top guest, someone I'm so excited about having on the show. So I've been trying to get on the show for a long time. It's Paul McGuinness, who's currently an FA Coach Educator with the English Football Association, but also worked was at Man United for over 20 years as a player and as a coach. Someone who really inspires me regularly. Watching his not only his sessions and delivering that, but also his continual work on social media about trying to break the game down and the importance of individual technique, and particularly the 1v1 duel and what that looks like. So someone who, like I said, really inspires me and motivates me, and I'm really privileged that he's going to come onto the show, and he's got so much knowledge and experience to share, not only about his coach education work, but his time at Man United and working with players like Rashford and Pogba and that Man United, obviously one of the best academies in the world, continually producing top talent and playing it in their first team. So someone has real knowledge and insight in the game, and so someone who you can really look up to and listen to, and know he's going to share some real coaching gold. So like I said, really privileged he's come onto the show, and this is a real amazing, insightful and interesting and inspiring hour, just over an hour of football coaching talk. So I know you're going to enjoy this one. Also now, just really privileged to announce, proud to announce that Albert Capellas, ex-head of Barcelona's Youth Academy, is also going to be joining us on the MyPersonalFootballCoach Virtual Academy. The next phase of the Virtual Academy launches at the end of March. He's joining Romeo Josek, ex-Dynamo Zagreb, head of technical development of Croatia. Marink Riedink, who's ex-Ajax coach, obviously myself. Scott Chickleday, a forward coach who works with pros and ex-Tottenham. Glenn Hicks, ex-Tottenham Academy. Charlie Quigley, who's the S&C coach at Middlesbrough, and Joe Sutton, who's ex-head of recruitment at Arsenal's foundation phase, are all going to be delivering on the MyPersonalFootballCoach Virtual Academy, the only virtual academy in the world where players can get weekly content from some of the best youth developers in the world. So they basically get a technical session from me every Monday, a webinar series on Wednesday, like a live recorded classroom session, and then like a live classroom session on the weekend, and sometimes question and answer sessions that obviously which fit around their UK and US time specifically, but everything's pre-recorded and obviously that can sit alongside their team training and stuff like that. So really privileged and proud to have such a dream team of coaches delivering on this unique opportunity for players and parents and coaches even to experience some of the best coaches in the world from some of the biggest academies in the world as well. So if you want to find out more, you can check out the info in the link. Also, you can just go to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com and check out the players and then the Virtual Academy, and spaces are limited, so make sure you check it out soon. But without further ado, let's get into the show. So Paul McGuinness, welcome to the show.
Hi Saul, yeah, great to speak to you.
You too, Matt. I really appreciate you taking the time. Can you just give us a brief outline of your playing and coaching journey up to this point, just very briefly?
Yeah, just quickly. I followed in my dad's footsteps. He was a player, coach, and manager at Manchester United. So I was in the youth teams and reserves at Man United in two periods. One before I went to Loughborough University, did a sports science degree, and then after I finished for a couple of years, I had a small time at Chester City and Crewe, and then Sir Alex brought me back. I was only about 26 onto the staff. I did a year or so doing education and welfare, and then I was given the job of head of the what would be the academy now. It was the Centre of Excellence. First with the under 9 to 16 players, and then after a period of about 10, 15 years, then with the under 18s, which I did for about 10 years or so, 10, 12 years as well. And now I'm a coach developer, or learning to do the job, that's for sure. It's another big step in your coaching sort of journey to try and help educate and develop coaches for the FA.
So how long are you there at Man United altogether?
As about 28 years as a player and as a coach, yeah. Luckily enough, it was like during some glory years, a sort of amazing period, yeah, when they were doing really well, yeah.
So then talk a little bit about that then. What was it like as a player playing in that? What was the culture like in terms of,
Well, first of all, when I was a player, it was a period under Ron Atkinson, when they had some really good players there, some fantastic players. And the great thing was I got a chance to be coached by Eric Harrison, who's like the class of 92 coach. He's always known for that, but really he coached a lot more players. He coached just above me was Norman Whiteside, Mark Hughes, people like that. They were a year or two older. So I played in the A team with him, and then I played in the reserves, which was a fantastic experience because in those days, if you didn't play in the first team, you played in the reserves, and you also played against other first team players, and you played in the main stadiums. So at United at the time, I could quite regularly play with 5, 6, 7, 8 internationals in the reserves. So at the back, they would have Gordon McQueen and say Paul McGrath, or it might be Kevin Moran, Graham Hogg. Up front, we had Mark Hughes, Whiteside, Brazil, or Stapleton. So, and Alan Muir and someone like that was an unbelievable player. So I had a great experience playing and training with those players. And then for some strange reason, only in my head, I decided I would go to university. But I played part-time as well at United for a year while I was at university. And probably it was the best thing I did because I met some unbelievable people and coaches there as well of all different sports at Loughborough University and carried on playing. And I was just, lucky again. I just turned up at the training ground to say hello to the coaches. And this is when Alec Ferguson was there, and they didn't have enough players for the reserves. Really, they didn't have enough senior players. So they asked me to join in for 8 games at the end of the season. I was due to go to America to do coaching over there, and they gave me a 2-year contract, Sir Alex. So yeah, it was an amazing bit of luck really for me.
What position did you play?
I played midfield, but when I played in the A team, they played me everywhere. I played most positions at the back, midfield, across the midfield, at the back, or wide. I could do a little bit of everything, I suppose.
Did you think like being surrounded and playing next to all those amazing, world-class players, do you think that affected your outlook as a coach in terms of sort of coach you are now in terms of the skill development sort of side of things?
Absolutely. I mean, even prior to that, growing up with my dad was obviously my biggest influence. My dad, we would practice on the field. He was an England international, broke his leg. We played with the Busby Babes. He saw and played against the great Real Madrid teams and so on. So he practiced on the local field with me, and he was like, and he is an amazing character really, but he's always doing something different. So he had lots of tricks. He called it the McGuinness flick, where you pretend to volley it and then step over it and flick it over someone's head. He had an overhead handstand back heel, which he saw Hendo, the great Real Madrid the great Real Madrid player from the 50s doing in practice, where I used to ping at his head, right at his forehead, and he used to dive forward onto his hands, do a handstand, and then sort of bicycle kick it over with the heel of his foot. And he ended up being physio trainer at Bury. He would go on the pitch before the games with the players. The physio, this is entertaining the crowd with all sorts of tricks. So I grew up with that atmosphere. And then when I was about 15, 16, because he knew all the top players, he played with them. Bobby Charlton was his big mate as well. And in Manchester around then, they had charity games, local radio station, Piccadilly Radio. Then it was Man City versus Man United Old Boys, or they would join in and play someone else. And he used to say to me, bring your boots, because you might get a game. And most weeks I got a game. I was playing with Bobby Charlton, played with him at least half a dozen times, maybe more. Brian Kidd, Nobby Stiles, Pat Crerand, and also for City, Bell Lee. Somebody I've played with all those players. It was just amazing. Bobby Charlton was amazing. He was probably in his 40s then. Both feet, could cross field passes with both feet, score goals, score a hat-trick every time, 30-yarders. So being right next to those players, I think, is something that the young players of today miss, playing alongside great players. I mean, to play with Norman Whiteside, people just don't know the skill he had. He was known to for being a big, tough, aggressive guy, but his skill and vision was incredible. Peter
Yeah,
Barnes, he's a great
those.
dribbler. Peter Barnes, played with Peter Barnes, is a great dribbler. I think being close up to those people, having them do things to you as well, 1-2, you draw you in, suck you in, play around you. I mean, Norman Whiteside in one practice match, I only use my hero because he was just a year or so above, but also he was the youngest player in the World Cup, broke Pele's record. So you're playing against this guy in training. I remember a ball going up right on the edge of the box, and I'm coming in behind. I thought, oh, Norman, I'm going to give it you because it's going to make my name. If he controls this, I'm going to hit him on the half turn. And as the ball came right out of the sky, what he did was, and you never saw him look, but he must have had a look. He controlled it with the outside of his left foot around one side, like on the half volley, trapped it and ran around the other side. And I was running towards him, trying to kick him. And it was like, wow, it's an unbelievable piece of skill. So yeah, you learn so much from being alongside these real top players. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a couple of things there, isn't interesting things. Obviously, we did your dad there, but that character and having that culture at home and of that bravado almost. You're talking about that skill and when you talk about the arrogance, skill and arrogance of timing, that sort of thing. So it's real interesting to grow up in that culture, and then again, playing alongside these players and seeing those up firsthand. I remember the reserve. My brother used to take me to reserve games at White Hart Lane, and seeing the those big pros and playing with the younger players. It's really interesting, isn't it? How now there's that big gap here, maybe in our development, maybe.
I think so. And going to games live. I mean, I obviously grew up. I was so mad with football. I always asked my dad in the school holidays and everything, could I go in training with him, whichever club he was at. So from the age of 10, 11, 12, I was joining in. And I was always playing against the older apprentices or the reserve team. And then you see some of them. I mean, even at Bury in those days, probably in the 80s, you had players who'd been at the very top level and were just seeing out the last end of their career, in the second or third division. So you had Sammy McElroy playing there, who's top international, captain of Ireland, Northern Ireland. Then you had the player manager was Martin Dobson. The one that really stuck out for me was a dribbler and crosser of the ball, Leighton James, who'd played for Wales. Now, if people get on YouTube and watch Leighton James, he plays against England and tears them to bits. He could shoot with both feet. He could drag it. I think dragging is such an important skill. And I was watching him, and he's just teasing them. He's dragging it along with the inside of his right foot, and then he'd drop his shoulder and come inside and shoot, or he'd dummy to shoot and then go again. And you're watching these players, and I studied it. It gave me lots of ideas for myself as a player, but then, to pass those things on. Dragging, I think, is something that is just completely, to me, it's essential. If you want to control the game, you have to have players who can drag the ball, because if you can drag it and keep it close to your foot, then you've got control. Because if the guy dives in, you can just knock it away from him on the inside or the outside. And you're looking at people now. The one that really stands out is Grealish. He drags it, and of course he gets fouled a lot, but that's because he's not lightning quick. So he takes the ball closer to people than other people would do. And then they dive in and he gets a foul because he's so skillful at taking it. I like these analogies and stuff. Michael Carrick did a really good presentation in the summer, and he called it getting close to the fire without getting burned, which is a nice analogy to have.
Yeah.
The problem in development is a lot of the coaches don't let the players try it, because to get close to the fire and not get burned, you've got to get burnt a few times, and get the timing wrong. But a lot of them, I think, are always saying, pass it, tempo, when sometimes to develop these skills, you have to let the kids really, slow it down and then change speed. And they have to experiment a bit, really.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about Jamal, who's just obviously at Bayern Munich.
Yeah.
Jamal Musiala, and he was in my first season at Chelsea. I took him in the 10s, and he used to drive some of the coaches mad. Like, they play quick because he wouldn't pass. But he really excited me. I thought, wow, what an outlier. And that was, really thing. But that's cultural thing, isn't it? It's that, teams want to play. They want team possession, and it's trying to get over that.
I think also it's one of the downsides of academies that they think it's got to look like the first team. It's premature professionalism. It doesn't have to look like their first team. But of course, if you've recruited lots of good players, you can sort of do that earlier because they're good. But I worry that if they get there too soon, they don't get enough practice. And that's why I like to play sort of not so serious games, but practice with mixed age groups, because the older ones can really practice sort of little tricks and so on. And the young ones really learn from playing with them. So at Man United years ago, we had a cage that we played in, which led to, you know, all sorts of dribbling combinations and timing and 1-2s and all this. But we played with mixed age groups. So at the time, you might have Pogba, Jesse Lingard, Michael Keane, Will Keane, Ravel Morrison. Or it was a really high talented group. Lots of Van Velsen, lots of people there. Team that won the Youth Cup. And they were playing, they were 18. Then we would have the 16-year-olds. And then we would have the 14-year-olds. And then we'd go, well, he's pretty good. Let's put him in. 12-year-old, say, Rashford was training with them. So they're learning. We'd say, they're not getting as many kicks as the other kids, but we'd say you're a privileged spectator. You're so close to this action with these top players, you're going to learn from them. And if you want to combine and get a 1-2 or anything like that, then in your own age group, you might have 1 or 2 players you can do it with. But if you're training with the older ones, you know, he's going to get 1-2s and combinations with Jesse Lingard and Pogba and whoever else is in there. So it's a really good way. It's a natural way, isn't it? You go down the park and go and play. That's what you would do.
Well, why do you think there's a lot of resistance to that? Why do you think academies don't do that mixed age group stuff more?
I think there's a health and safety part to it where they're worried about that. But in all my time, you know, sometimes I got a bit near the bone, but in general, the older ones, if you explain it to them, they know exactly what's going on. You know, they go against themselves strong, like the old ones. But when the young ones are there, they're very respectful, and it's a bit like a big brother, little brother environment. And they really help them come on, and they were good on a social level as well. A bit like playing in the park. I remember when we played in the park we go on a Sunday and practice, me and my dad, and it'd be overhead kicks, diving headers, all sorts of practice, dribbling. And then some kids would come over who were playing on the park, and they go, all right, Wilf, can we have a game as well? And we get might be my brother there, and maybe we get 1 or 2 of them. There'd be like 3 we'd have about 4 of us, and we'd take on about 15 of them. And they were all different ages. You know, my dad used to say, well, just try and beat them all. And so I would, you know, I'd have a go, and it's fun. And I think that there's an element of that you have to have. And because people forget these type of skills that we're talking about, you've got players who've got to perform under high competition in front of 80,000 people. But what the skills require is that you're relaxed while you're doing them. You're comfortable. You know, your body can't be tense. So when people are shouting on, pass, you know, move it quick, you know, you've got a certain tension. The coach is telling you, when you're actually, that ball comes, you see Mahrez is unbelievable, isn't it? They play him like a 60-yard pass. The goalkeeper will play it out to him, and he just brings it out or down with a little touch with the outside of his foot, or controls it in one past the player. But Jim Ryan sort of really highlighted this for me when we were there. Jim Ryan was a coach at Man United, worked with me really a lot, and helped me with my coaching. And he said, you remember, to control the ball, you have to relax your body. You have to cushion a lot. You might sometimes wedge it, you know, and bounce it off. But most of the time, you have to just cushion like you're catching a ball. Then you have to cushion the body. So you have to be relaxed. And your mind needs to then be sort of absorbed and relaxed. And if someone's shouting and telling you what to do all the time, I think that's a problem. That's why probably these guys like Eze and Mahrez and all these people who grow up in the cages, they just fall in love with it and they're absorbed in what they're doing. And that was another thing I'm trying to read up about why it works, the cage and so on. I read some research by a woman called Barbara Fredrickson that just says, if you go in with a happy frame of mind to anything, then you're more likely to be creative. But if you're tense, then you're not. So getting the right atmosphere, the right competitive element, but also be able to relax and perform these skills is absolutely vital.
I think that's really interesting, because it's sort of like the issue, isn't it, sometimes academy football, because a lot of people talk about winning mentality, which is great, but then I sort of, they say we want to win the game, that's fine, but I say, well, it's not a neutral trade-off, because you're saying, well, but then you're talking about the players taking less risks, and like you say, moving the ball, playing a bit quicker, because that might make you work as a team more efficiently and be more productive. And are you judging the success of your academy by the games on Sunday, or are you really about individual development? Whether you say, well, game doesn't matter, but then there's all those sorts of things. I think culturally we really struggle with that one, don't we? But we want to win on the weekend, or is it the ego of the coach, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think when we were in the academy there, Jim Ryan used to say the only team other than the first team where it really matters is the reserve team, because they've got to be really preparing for the next step to be winning. And of course, we're in the other age groups, you're giving everybody a game, they're all having a go. That's not to say we weren't trying to win every game. We certainly were, but it wasn't going to be at the expense of people developing their skills. And even then, you have to remind people. So we had a really nice player, a left footer, who would come in from the right, come across with his left foot. And he's searching for the right pass, a bit like an Ozil type of player. And he's looking, and you'd hear the shouts from the side, even from some of our coaches, play it simple, get rid, play it one touch. And then I just used to say, no, let him go. Let him decide, because we're not on the pitch. We can't see what he can see exactly, the pictures. I think it's very dangerous to be telling people what to do when they've got the ball. You haven't got the pictures that they've got. So what he would do, this lad, he'd come across, and he'd look at he'd come across from the right, and he'd look at the left winger, and he'd look at him, and then he'd come across again. He'd just be waiting. He'd look at him again, and then he'd bring his foot back as if he's going to play it to him. And then the fullback would make a move towards the left winger. And then at the very last second, he'd play the ball inside him, disguised pass. Now, to get the timing on that, you have to just wait for the right moment. And Jim Ryan would always say, disguise, it's small, late movements. Now, you've got to let them practice it. And you know that sometimes the gap is so small that the margin for error is tiny, but it might be a match-winning pass. And he might have to get 9 out of 10 wrong before he gets the right one, So that's a big part of understanding how they develop, letting them.
I was interviewing Lewis Gota, who's the now Arsenal Academy Foundation phase, and he was talking about his time at Reading, and he said one thing had really big impact on him was he was playing Man United one day, and they were 1-0 up, and it was all high intensity, very stressful. But he just remembers looking over to the Man United bench, and they were just silent. They weren't, Eamon, obviously, I know Eamon's top drawer for the foundation phase lead, and I remember that time we going to Man United with Chelsea and Tottenham as an academy coach, and watching their coach just let the boys get on with it. I thought it was really powerful. Do you know what I mean? Just like, not getting caught in the emotion of the game, and like you say, letting the boys make their own decisions. And
that's important. Let's not say you're not coaching by doing that, because you are coaching. You're creating the right atmosphere for them to make their own decisions. That's not to say we didn't give them information, and we did. We sometimes had a problem with parents because they'd be saying, well, the other team's coaching more, they're more emotional than you, they want to win more and all this. But you're doing the coaching during the week, and it's their chance to play at the weekend. And then that's not to say there's not lessons to be learned in the game, but if you read up, on it, there's things like cognitive overload. Basically, you can't handle more than 4 or 5 pieces of information, so you don't want to clog them too much. In fact, I was on a good sort of webinar the other day, and Klopp was on it, Jurgen Klopp, and he said 3 things that really stood out for me that people should take notice of. He said, don't overwhelm the players. Don't give them too much information. When you're giving your information, make it very clear. He said, I'm dealing with different languages and so on. I've got to make it clear. And he said, and if they don't get it right, don't blame them. Look at yourself first and see if you could have been clearer. So I think in lots of cases, there's shouting all the time from the side of the pitch. It's really disturbing for the players. They can't make their own minds up a lot of the time. That's not to say there's not clear information that you can give, but you really shouldn't be playing the game for the players. That's for them. and then some bits of information. I was lucky because I said I was at Man United, where I had Eric Harrison, who used to sit upstairs in the office while the home games were on. He did used to bang on the window really hard if you did something wrong, and come down and give you. But most of the time he kept away. The biggest influence I had on that was a guy called Mike Holliday, who was the football coach at Loughborough University. And when I first got there and played for them, it was the first time and had a coach who didn't shout constantly during the game. He just stood on a bank. He'd have a cigarette going. He was like Cesar Menotti with the cigarettes. Half time, he'd maybe say 2 or 3 things. At the end, he might say a couple of things. But what was interesting was, because we didn't see him every day, he used to just put a list on. We trained twice a week. We played twice a week. And he put a list on his notice board and said, you fill it in when you come. And then you would have half an hour with him during the week, just sat and talking and so on. And I found that to be a really good way of working. Obviously, you're chatting when you've got them every day and so on. You're talking a little bit, but definitely with the half times and all that was vital. In fact, the first time I was in the first team dressing room at half time was a match at Villa Park. I'd gone to watch the match, and the manager said, "Come down and come and watch a half time." And it was 0-0 at half time. And I went in and I thought, well, let's see him work now. This Fergie, let's see the hairdryer. Let's see what he says now. It was the quietest dressing room ever. They all just sat around. He went in the corner. He got a cup of tea. And then it was 10 minutes in those days, not 15 minutes. So just before they went out, he said 2 or 3 things. He said, look, the pitch is very firm. So when you're playing your through balls, they're going through too far to the keeper, and it's running through. He said, work the passes up closer to the line and then make runs for the line. They won 2-0 in the second half, and that was it. Now, the fact that he was having a cup of tea and he wasn't, probably just gave the players a sense of, well, there's calm, there's no need to worry. It was very little, but very clear and precise information. And I think, the average sort of coach would be very surprised at how little ranting and raving goes on in dressing rooms, and how that's really a bit of a caricature, how it's very precise, small bits of information that's required. And I think, that's the same with kids, definitely.
So going back then, think about to your your coaching then. Tell us a little bit about what did that look like in terms of, how did you create an environment? What do your sessions look like where you create an environment where players could express themselves and be skillful? And obviously, because you're working at the upper end of the academy, obviously you've got to deal a little bit more with.
There's all a balance. There's all a balance to that. Different parts of the week we would do different things. But we used to start, Jim and I did the under-18s a lot, and on a Monday, because they'd had the weekend, they'd had the game, and they also went to college on a Monday, we didn't want to have too much coaching, too much information, too much that. So we made it pretty much a whole skills day. We also had the lads off on day release from school, so we had any age group we could have to join in with us, which we did. They would have lunch, come in, they'd be at school in the morning, have lunch, and then we'd go in the afternoon. And we'd start off, we didn't have traditional warm-ups. We played 5-a-side to warm up. So that was, to me, the warm-up is get your body warm. And then that might be for 20 minutes free. So they're getting what Jim called a high volume of football. It's adding to it. If you did that 3-4 times a week, you've got an hour's extra football. That's not to say that the fitness guys didn't do their speed work and agility and all that. They did, but we warmed up by playing football and got extra work, and that was free a lot of the time. And they knew that was free because we would leave them sometimes in the gym playing themselves, and we'd go and get a cup of tea and come out with a cup of tea. Now, just by the fact that you've got the cup of tea and you're chatting, they know it's different. It's a different atmosphere. They know the coaching hasn't started. And this is like a playground thing before school. So they would do that some days. And then we went out, we quite often do boxes. At that age, we did 4v2s. I don't like these rondos with like too many people in, where people are just taking the mickey and standing around. To me, it has to be part of the game. So 4v2 is very good because now you can have 3 lines, 2 or 3 lines. So you're trying to break the line and you're testing them. We played 1 touch. So that's very difficult. You've got to get the right way to pass, and then you can have a lot of disguise comes into the passing. And we wanted it smooth passes generally. If it bobbled or bounced, then we were really strict on it. very strict. And we were strict if it went in the air. They had to get it down and smooth it out quickly. And yeah, lots of disguise. That would be quite a regular warm-up. So they were real fundamentals for the defending as well, not to get beaten and not to get split. Then we would sometimes do, like you see some of these ones that Barcelona have done. It was one we saw in Spain. It was 7v3, sort of down the side of the 18-yard box, with one in the middle. So we were working particularly on that guy, on his awareness and combinations and so on, and the people on the side getting the right way to pass. Then we had an exercise Jim had, which really I could call it a matador exercise, which was for combinations and dribbles. So that we might do this in, say, 3 sets of 8 minutes or so on. And depending on the numbers, it might be a big overload, 8v6, sometimes as much as 12v8 or what have you. And we might mix the age groups. And the 6, say it was 6 against 10, the 6, if they won it, had to dribble, they couldn't pass. So now it's 1 against 10. And if it was anybody, you just have to dribble. So, and then the ones who the 10, they were combining. So they had to combine, but they had to flow through. So people said, well, there's no direction, but there is. You're trying to go through them and flow. So in here, Jim had these sayings like the arrogance of timing. So this is to control the timing of when you're going to go. So you play soft passes between you to draw them in, and then maybe play around the corner. And then it could bring in disguise as well. Disguise and combinations of running. So then the rule was you must run. If you play, you must run. You must try and get all the way through. Now we had Paul Scholes, when he was he'd retired, but he was training with the reserves, come in and join in. And Paul Scholes would go play a 1-2, get it back, go through the next one, dummy the next one, step over the next one, play a 1-2 around the next guy, come all the way back. And wow, unbelievable. So great example. But yeah, that was a stock. And I would say it's one of the best practices for replicating street football and combinations. And we would have some players, Pogba, Rashford, Lingard. We had a lad called Matt Starley, who plays for Norway. He would dribble past 5 or 6 people in that practice. It was amazing, yeah. But I think the psychology of it comes into it, because it's very much high skill, but also 1 against 10, you just really, it's almost like a free hit. You can't, basically, you're going to lose it, so you might as well have a go. It's the whole mentality of it. And then the combinations then became very, very clever, and the timing of them, either running to commit someone and play a 1-2 or a third man run and so on. It's very instinctive sort of play. And we would do that, and then we would go in and we'd have a cup of tea and a piece of cake, and just everybody chatting and having a few jokes and a laugh. And then they knew then there was going to be the cage. So we would go in the cage after that. And that was all the things we just practiced and more, because there was now shooting and blocking and so on. Anybody watching it would probably think, and in fact, we did have some coaches who said that's a complete waste of time. It doesn't look like the game. Mm. And if you just look at it like that, it doesn't. You've not got quite the same positions. It's all over. But we found the best number was 13 aside. It was about 55 by 35 with a roof over it. It had to be really high skills because of the constraints. And 13 aside is really 1 in goal, and then 3 sets of 4 aside. So that would happen in a game, tight around the box or in a tight area. You might have to get out of an area. You play a little 1-2, you do a dummy, you get out. But the fact is, now there's another 4 in front of you. If you go through them, there's another 4. So it was like combinations, dribbling and so on steroids. You were getting more and more and more of it. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about like the skill development, individual skill development stuff. Would you like pull players out and say, you got a Y player, say, what about this? Try this skill, this one technique.
Yeah, that was a big part of it as well. But as they were growing up, we had 4v4s. But the reason the 4v4s came into the games program is at the time, it was 8v8, but you'd have 8v8 and 7 subs. And somebody else would turn up and we'd go, well, why don't we have a 7-a-side then, or a 6-a-side? And nobody would do it. It was almost as if it was a trick, it's like, but so he said, we want them all playing. They're not getting enough touches. So we devised well, it wasn't me so much. I was in charge of those age groups at the time. It was Tony Whelan and Tom Statham. They were putting in charge of this project. It was a university project where we had research and studies done. We had 4-a-side. There was different games. One was with goals with nets with a goalkeeper. One was with goals just with cones. Another was with 4 goals. Another one was line ball. And they just played. Yeah. They just kept rotating around and played the opposition. They could play as much. And the stats were unbelievable. How many more touches, dribbles, shots, tackles, individual actions was amazing.
Yeah.
Now, just at that time, René Meulenstein came to join us. And he was the Dutch guy who came from Corver coaching. He'd actually been working directly with Corver. Now, so he was like, it was like an explosion going off. He was incredible, the impact he had, and he had an impact on every age group, every coach. And now at the start, a lot of drill-based stuff, a lot of the stuff that you do against passive opposition, then building it up into games and so on. And he had a big impact on us all, and a great impact on the program. And the fact we had the 4v4s going, that was like, well, show us what you've done in the training during the week, So that was perfect for it. Went into the 8v8s, and this happened consistently all the way up. And so he was a massive influence. And I must say, he's the best I've ever seen at that type of coaching, that 1v1. He's very charismatic, and he had a big influence on all of us, on all the players, and the whole program going through. He didn't do a lot of defending or anything. It was all the tricks, the skills, the dribbles, but that's what we wanted. And he worked with a lot of the age groups, and then you knew he was very ambitious. So it was like a shooting star. He was coming up, he was lighting it, and then he ended up going off to the first team as well, but still had, was still helping us. So that all mixed in. And then we had Jim Ryan, who was great on these combinations and free play. We'd had the Eric Harrison influence, where he was particularly strong on awareness and so on. So there was a whole mix that came into it. And so then, we were doing, the turns and the dribbles and so on within that. And the kids already had it with them when they came up to my age group. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had René on the show actually, not long ago. He was talking about that time, and I asked him. He goes, "Well, was it hard to, get the buy-in from all these coaches, maybe who never experienced it before?" And he said, "No, of course not, because Sir Alex was there telling us that this is what we're going to do, basically."
Yeah, that was always there with Sir Alex, but it was so good that you couldn't help but say, "Yeah, this is helping." So I think, I don't know whether he noticed it, but we sort of bent over backwards to let him do what he could do. We were doing all the other stuff behind the scenes so that he could focus on that. And, I suppose it's a bit like, if you've got Ronaldo in your team, you don't worry about him running back too much. You let him do all the skills. So René didn't have to do any of the the digging the dirt and all that, but everybody else played the role,
Yeah, well, what I meant was that also we had a similar sort of philosophy at Tottenham for a long time, where it's very much express yourself, 1v1 ball master, and there was some coaches just wouldn't, had a bit of pushback maybe because it was very unconventional, very un-English thing to do. But obviously, you had a very sort of open environment to do that. Yeah,
you've got to remember it's a part of the game. It's not everything. It's a part. It's not the whole thing. But if you've got ball mastery, then you can go on to the other things. I mean, I've got this stuff we're doing now. This is very much similar. We're trying to get people at the FA to look under the microscope at individual skills on and off the ball, not just attacking, but defending and zooming in, because quite often they're not seeing the details because they want to coach 4-3-3. They want to coach the system, the high press, the build the attack, but they're not seeing the details. Now, all the work you do with your players and that we did with means that you're technically capable of actually doing the tactical work. If you can't technically do it, then the tactics and the patterns, they really mean nothing,
Yes, tell us about that then, because I was going to come on to that. I mean, you've created this quadrant tool, this observation tool, and I watched one of your, you've used it a lot with 1v1 attacking. I was really interested in that. We did that, and also watched your low block webinar earlier, you were talking about defending in it and 2v1 defending. So it really opens up. Tell us about that. How did that come about? The quadrant tool.
I'd already sort of seen, there was change. Look, there's some fantastic coaches, aren't there now? And the tactical awareness and the tactical skills of Guardiola, of Klopp, of some of the English guys coming through now, is great. And obviously coaches are drawn to that. It's on TV, it's on Match of the Day, it's on Sky, it's everywhere. So people get into that. And then I saw people going to the A license. The A license is based around that because it's supposed to be high performance team coaching. So I saw people on the course and they were doing it. But when it came to now, we've got the structure, but how does the individual play within the structure? How do they find their own space? How do they move to create space for someone else? How do they control the ball? What are the connections? What's the individual duel? Well, they didn't quite have that organized in their head. They had some of it. So then we said, we need to really look and focus on this. And we came up with the term, we'll look under the microscope. And in that sense, it's a good analogy because if you just twist the dial around, you change the focus with a different lens, you're going from the full game at 11-a-side to maybe to units, to pairs, to individuals. So we started to do this on the course, and I used, it's nothing new. All the top people are doing it anyway. They zoom in and they see all the details. Where we were trying to help coaches with it was to be a little bit more specific and give a guide. So we put a circle around the pair. It can be a small circle, really tight, or it can be a bigger circle. And then we put a cross across it in the quadrants. And we say, well, where are they? Say on the horizontal line, is the defender goal side, ball side? Or is the attacker blind side of the ball? Or is he offside? So we'll have a look at where is it? And you start to see common interactions and movements, because then you'll start to see, there's a blindside run behind, or here's someone dropping off, or someone opening up to create the space. So you can see the spaces in that, but we went further and said, well, yeah, that's okay. But if we take that, not just as an area on the ground, but like a cylinder going up. So if you and I are in the cylinder and we use the quadrants, well, where's my arm against you? Where's my leg coming across you? So we can use it. And a good analogy Pete Sturgis uses in the foundation phase, he says to kids, well, if you push in on my shoulder that way, it's like a revolving door, I'll spin out the other way. I like that. I like analogies like that, which help you. So we've started to use it on the courses. It's for off the ball and on the ball. It's for defending and for attacking. And we're just getting people to zoom in and really see the detail. And then you start to see, hang on, there's some key concepts where maybe we've got to focus on and we're maybe not coaching. So I've watched a lot of kids football or even adults where, the forwards, there's some key skills really. And one of them would be maybe getting blindside of your opponent so that he can't see you, but you can see him. So I tell the story of when I was a young coach at United, in my 20s, and they played Barcelona, and Gary Pallister was marking Romario, who I think scored 2 goals. And the next day, Pallister came in the coach's room, put his feet on the desk and said, wow, that Romario, what a player. He said, every time I looked at the ball, then looked at him, he was looking at me. He said, I've never had a player look at me so much. So here's a key thing in a duel, that you've got to look at the defender, see what his body shape is like, see if his eyes are looking away, and that might be the time to move. And of course, that's not only it, the striker has got to look at that. So it also was part of what I did with Marcus Rashford. He came to me at 16, 17 as a winger, a number 10, always used to drop in deep to get the ball to feet and show his skills. Like you can see now, we had all those skills then. But then we said, well, look, you're getting stronger. Let's try and make you into a centre forward who can run behind. So you need to stay away from the ball, learn to prepare, and then get eye contact with the passer and now make the different runs, blindside runs, opening up, chest forward. So we taught him about body orientation, not having his back to goal all the time, being side on, ready to change chest forward. But the key thing is in that there's quite a few interdependent sort of factors that come into it, concepts. So you've got to prepare really on the last line against the defender. You want to maybe get blindside so that you can see him, but he can't see you. you have to prepare your space by maybe drifting away, or he might come to you and now you'll go into the space he's got. So you're trying to coordinate that. You've also got to coordinate it with what's the passer going to do? Where's the ball going to do? So you've got to get connection with the passer. And then you've got to get eye contact with him. And then you've got to reveal the run. So are you going inside to go outside? So that whole process, that took about 6 months. And then he was fortunate he got a chance in the first team. And that was it. He was in. 3 months later, he was in the England team. And I think that process of working really hard at that, with a lot of individual coaching, not just for him, but for the other players, that really helped. So that was also like the catalyst to this idea of the quadrants and this idea of under the microscope.
Yeah, I remember the first block of playing out from the back, starting the attack, as you called it, and you're stepping in with. I think Eric Steele was doing a session, and you're stepping in. He said, "Right, come on, and Paul." And it really inspired me because I was like, I felt like as a coaching community, as an international coaching fraternity, we'd gone so far into the games-based thing, or just purely games. I remember being in a meeting with the Singaporean FA and talking about skills coach and say, well, we don't do any of that now. We just do game stuff. That's all we do. I thought we'd moved so far away from the individual stuff. And I thought finally there's someone who's, coming out and saying, actually, we need to actually hone back in on the individual. And focus on the skill thing in those different environments, but maybe go back into those individual techniques, the individual brilliance that change games.
Absolutely. And then you've got to have those sort of ideas, concepts, little capabilities of the players. So has he got that capability to look at the defender, look at the space, peel away, and then reveal? But you've got to know that these things are interdependent. So I've done this at a few places and demonstrations, and I'm trying to get the striker to do that, get the timing. But when they're playing the ball around in the midfield, the quality of the passes has either been bobbling or too hard or what have you, which means that the receiver can't get his touch and play the pass. So we have to make sure we get the fundamentals in first. And that's what we're trying to do now. We've got a group of us looking at how can we restructure maybe some of the courses and the CPD to say, look, we need to get back to the very basics. Well, I don't call them basics. If you call them basics, people sort of go, oh, well, we'll go past that. We don't need it. It's fundamentals. If you don't have these fundamentals of passing and control, then you're never going to get to it. So I like to think of it as an analogy. If all these little ideas that you need and the skills that you need, the techniques, if each one of them is like a connection on a circuit board, an electric circuit board, and each time it happens, a light goes on. So the first thing is if I'm dragging, that's the connection with the ball. And I'm trying to get a yard to get a pass off. If I drag, connection. Now, the next concept, if I know that I go one way and dodge the other, that's a concept to go against the flow, to beat you. Now, I've got my head up and I'm going to play to the next guy, and he's got already half turned so he can look over his shoulder. So that's another concept. Light bulb goes on. Now I play in the pass, but I play it really smooth. Now, that's important because that means he can have another look. Now, if the guy ahead of him is just off his man, he's now got an idea he might be coming to feet or going behind. He'd prefer to go behind. So now if that guy has already had his look, he can get his first touch to the right place. That's another light going on the connection. Bump, bump, bump. So everything's running smooth in a flow. Now he looks at the guy and he wants to see a signal. He gets eye contact. Now he wants to see body movement. Now, if the guy just all of a sudden opens up his body and his chest forward, now he knows where to play that pass. Yeah? So he's ready to play the pass. But if he sees the defender cutting it off, now he might reverse the pass and play it inside him. So there's all these connections going on. It is a very simple game, and I hope that doesn't sound too complicated.
No,
but if any of those connections are not right, it's going to break down.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, you talked about cushioning and wedging the ball. Yeah. It's like when I did my level 2, Keith Boanas, top FA educator, we broke down all the techniques and worked real technical practices. And I don't think people cover that anymore. So you've got a generation of coaches coming through and not being taught, basic techniques like that. That's what Chris Randy, one of my mentors, talked about. He said, there's just very little technical coaching going on these days because maybe, the coaches don't know, haven't been upskilled to know how to.
Yeah, I think that's where we're looking maybe that we will revise that and go back to it and really go back into well, what's now the perception action coupling? You've got to perceive all the things, and then you've got to be able to control the ball and play it right and do everything. And coaches, that's the idea of this under the microscope, that they can zoom in, they can use it. If they've got this as a coaching tool to zoom in or zoom out, they've got it all their career. So now with Graham Carrick, Michael Carrick's brother, I work with him at the FA. So now we're looking at 2v2 combinations. Now, really, if you've already learned to use this under the microscope, look from head downwards and what are they doing, what are the spaces, you've zoomed in on the guy on the ball and you see that he drops his shoulder and comes in. And the guy ahead of him now makes a movement away to come close. And now they play. Now that's 2v2. You've connected the two of them. And you're really closely looking, and that might be a 1-2 or a pass and follow or an overlap, you know? And now you've got some key concepts you're looking at in the game,
René Mullenstein made a great point on the show, and he talked about we were talking about the ball mastery in the 1v1, how it's just an element, and obviously you're doing all the other game stuff, your possession work and all those, the free play, and how he said, like, if you give me the ball mastery and 1v1 stuff and then the possession stuff as well, it makes the perfect, sort of development sort of environment. You have a mix, isn't it? So rather than saying it doesn't have to all be opposed or all be unopposed, just having a mix and knowing when and where to use what tools, right?
Yeah, and that's why we're looking under the microscope off the ball. What's your positional play? What's your body orientation? Do you scan? Do you give a clear signal to the passer? Do you know how to entice your marker out of a space so that then there's a passing line? All these type of things, are important off the ball as well. So it can't all be just ball mastery, but certainly if you haven't got the ball mastery, you will never get to the point where you can decide which pass to make and connect with people, because you'll be forever fighting with the ball, or you'll be playing a 50-50 ball. So if the ball's being played out to the fullback and the striker's chasing him down, if the pass isn't quite right on, if he hasn't got a turn, if he hasn't got, say, an outside hook, pretend to play it down the line and do an outside hook and the striker goes flying past him, well, he's just going to be stuck with a 50-50 pass down the line. So, we must really, it's vital that you get these things in. And that's why also the games program, you shouldn't be jumping to too big a game, 11-a-side, too soon. You need to get good in the individual tactics, pairs, threes, in smaller games. That's why futsal is such a great game, because it's very clear. It's very clear learning opportunities in futsal and small-sided games. You can see the pictures clearly, and you can see if you've done them well or not.
And tell us a bit about your social media presence. You're quite active on social media. I saw I really enjoy your post. I saw one the other day when you were talking about the curved run of the City player there, breaking down individual tactics, different techniques. What do you think that's really? I mean, tell us about why you're so active and how powerful that is.
I'm doing that for a bit of pleasure, a bit of fun, but also to pass it on. You don't always get the biggest reach. You hope people look. You're just trying to maximize where people see it, and if that gets people thinking, that's good. And if it draws attention to these individual tactics, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm really interested in all parts of the game. I'm interested in the things that Guardiola's doing now with his false nine and all this sort of stuff, everything. But all of that, I think Gundogan, you saw that on that clip. He arcs his run, which brings the defender with him a little bit and creates space for the pass behind. It's brilliant play, and you're just hoping that it sparks some curiosity for other people to use this tool. It's on YouTube. I'll do an advert for it now. It's on YouTube. FA Learning, and it's under the microscope. So it's series. They've got 6 blocks from the A license. So you've got build the attack, create the attack, finish the attack. You've got high press, mid block, and low block. I think they're worth looking at for people who are interested in coaching. And it's just to get a process for them to use themselves. It's not saying do it like this, but it's saying, look, have a look for yourself, and then you decide if you've seen these key sort of factors, how you want to coach it. Yeah.
Now, how do you keep yourself fresh and upskill yourself and keep learning? And do you have like mentors, and who do you like to watch?
Yeah, I watch all this. This is really, I've got in the last couple of years, I've really got into zooming in on this. And then once you zoom on this, now I've started on twos. And then if you've got the pairs, then I think you've already seen some pictures for pairs. Now you start to see the third man run. again, you learn from all people. Graham Carrick, Michael's brother, the two of them were obviously at West Ham when they were kids. And West Ham did a lot of third-man runs. And he's explained to me, and we spoke to Tony Carr about it. So you're always sort of tapping into people wherever you can. So yeah, I do that. I still speak regularly to Jim Ryan, he's one of the most creative coaches I've ever met. There's lots of good people at the FA that you can learn from, but I learn from the players as well. You're on calls with top players. Danny Dicchio just pointed a small detail out to me on a course, which was great. So yeah, you're always learning. If you're curious enough, I've just gone with the under-16s national team now to help them with some of their camps. I suppose I'm there as a bit of an old head now, helping them out to give them a bit. But you've got people like Justin Cochran, who's really bright on the skills side. I'm working with Rob Edwards, who's really keen on the teamwork and he's there's some really good coaches that you can learn from. You just got to keep your eyes open. I listen. I think having as much idea on how people learn is important. So there's a couple of books recently, Doug Lemov, isn't it, on learning, teaching, the real teaching stuff, all the stuff with constraints-based stuff, Keith Davids, all that. I try to keep that, but try and mix it with your own experience. Yeah.
And what's your ambitions? What's your ambitions in the game? Have you got?
Yes, I want to help as many people as I can, I suppose, in this role. It's a different role. I had 28 years at one place where you're trying to imprint a brand on players. You're trying to give them a way of life, a way of playing in one way. Now you go to this role and it's very difficult because it's not, everybody's got their own brand. They've got their own way of doing things. So then it's more like this under the microscope, give them a process that might help them, with their thoughts and what they do. You're not in a position to say, this is the way to do it, which is hard when all your life you've been doing that. So, I'd like to get good at this role, but also, helping with those England teams. If you could, in a small way, help develop football altogether in the country, small bits, that's one way. Or the other thing is to go back in a club and help one club in a big way. When you've got more of a focus with a smaller amount of coaches and so on. So, yeah, who knows what the future holds? Yeah.
And what would your advice be to a young aspiring coach who want to have a career in the game and a great career like yourself?
Well, yeah, those things I said before there, be curious is massive. You've got to be curious. You've got to learn. You've got to throw yourself into it, and practice as much as possible. But one great bit of advice I had off Jim Ryan years ago, he gave it to us all the coaches at United on a CPD thing. He said, coach what you like. So I think that's really good advice, because if you're coaching what somebody else does, or you've seen Bielsa, he does it, so you'll copy. Okay, you copy bits. But if you're just copying someone else, you can't expect coaches to just all be the same in a club. You've got to coach what you like, as long as it fits within your club's sort of spectrum. Because if you do, luckily Jim and I were on the same wavelength. We liked combination play, we liked dribbling, we liked fast attacking play. I loved, so we used to call it, we used to have a theme for it, the hunting dogs. Them all working together to win the ball back. All these things, coach what you like, and then the players will see that you've got a belief in it, a feeling, an emotion for it. You've got to have that emotion. And I suppose that's the biggest thing. If you have that feeling for it, I call it the spirit of football. What you're doing in youth football definitely is trying to pass that feeling on, so that other people really, they're inspired to use their own skills. And I suppose, long-winded answer to this, but the biggest thing is to add value. You can be a success, win the league a year or two, but over the time, if you're adding value to everybody, then that's the biggest thing for a youth coach.
What about, I get asked this question a lot from people as well, how can they upskill themselves on those technical elements, those 1v1 elements of the game? What's the best way to do that from a young coach?
I do think it's a massive help if you can do them yourself. There's some people out there that can't do it. That's not to say you can't there, but if you're expecting your players to be full on ball mastery and so on, then I always felt you should be able to do it yourself, to demo it and so on. It's not for everybody. Obviously, not everybody can do that. But then the next thing is to really look under the microscope so that you understand how it works. What are the biomechanics of it so that you can explain it properly. And then using analogies is good, to help them. To help them with it so that you don't always break it down into all its parts. An analogy can help you do the whole thing. So I like that one of like the, coming out of the revolving door, because that gives you the whole movement. How would you come out of that revolving door quickly? Things like that. Yeah. So, but if you're a skills coach, you've really got to know the skills. So it helps if you can do them, and helps that you've really thought about the mechanics of it, and then also understand how people learn it, and the language you use and so on.
Yeah, I had a call. I'm mentoring an academy coach at the moment from an academy does the under-13s. He just wants to know more about the individual technical elements. So you'd mentioned the striker runs and stuff like that. So what do you recommend? Just like watching more games, go to watch players, what they do, and if you ain't got a chance to play with them, go and watch, first team players and watch what they had, their movements and those sorts of things. Best way to try and learn.
Yeah, all of those things. Watching games live, watching people recording it, going back, seeing good coaches. I mean, Rene, just one little thing I remember with Rene, he just said, right, on your outside hook turn, don't reach and tap the ball and then tap it again. He said, just reach and just stand on it, and then you'll not stand on it, but put your foot past it, and then when you come back, it's just ready to go. So it just like saves you half a second. And, little details like that, really watch. You're looking for how can you do it in a flow, and how can you go against the flow of the opponent. So a lot of that then is down to timing, changes of speed, changes of direction, disguise, using your body as a barrier. All those would be key tactics. And then, also sussing out what's your opponent's strengths or weakness. All those things come into it, yeah.
So do you envisage then, like in the next 10 years or so, big more emphasis on those individual skills and techniques in academy football?
I hope so. I think it's needed, definitely. I mean, that's where this is aimed at with this under the microscope stuff. I know this group I've got with Pete Sturgis, Noddy Holder, Graham Carrick, we're moving that skill development. How do we do it? It's not always easy. National thing to what happens is, you might have some good people and they show some people and then they show someone else, and it all just gets diluted if you're not careful. So we have to find a way to really inspire people to do it. I think it's coming more and more in at the professional level, in the sense of a few ways. Some players, some pro players doing it off their own back with their agent and so on. It's happening in American sports and so on, where they get individual coaches working with them. Not that they've got loads of time in between they get all the games at the moment, but there's that. There's the development coach who's working with top players who are on the fringes of the first team squad. That's the role that Rennie was doing for a time. That's really important in the individual stuff. I think you have to be careful with you have to do it in terms of positions. You do, because they're different, but you have to remember to connect the games. So even in your positional stuff, if you just work with the forwards on their own and you don't connect them to the midfield and defenders, who they don't get the connection between the passer and the receiver. They both have to be on the same wavelength. They have to understand the runs. They have to understand the timing. So just working on your own, not enough. It's like the goalkeepers working just on their own. They need the forwards to shoot against them, and then to really make it realistic, they need the defenders in the way. So you can never get away from the full game. It's that whole where you sort of go into detail with a part and then put it back into the whole game.
Lovely. Paul, thanks very much, mate. Thanks for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Good. Great to talk to you. Yeah. Cheers, Saul.
Thanks for tuning in to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Dynamic Ball Mastery Program is the world's leading online individual technical training program, proven and developed at the highest level in the English Premier League. Sign up now to train like the pros and take your game to the next level. Master the ball, master the game.